Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning into this. I hope it's going to be of interest to you. Values are something that have always interested me, and I think we don't take them sufficiently seriously. And yet they are a very important part of our motivations as individuals, and they're also crucial to our organisations and how we hold together or don't as societies. So it's something I've thought about my whole career as an academic, as a sociologist. And it's something I'm really delighted to be talking about today. And I hope that the what's the point, the takeaway, is that what I'm saying will help you to think about your own values and motivations, and also about what's happening in British society at the moment and in organisations. I'm going to talk about how values have become really prominent in organisations, in value statements, but how that doesn't necessarily reflect the values that are being practiced in those organisations. So I hope there's going to be something that's relevant and relatable for everybody. Values can sound like something, pretty abstract, but I'm going to show you that actually they're very much at the heart of who we are and who we associate with and who we feel friendly towards. That they're at the heart of our organisations and groups. And one of the ways in which they're more concrete is that we actually convey them not in, those abstract value statements about these are our values, very abstract. And, when you're researching values, you can't really ask people, what are your values? Some people are very reflective about that. But of course, actually how we know is how people behave. And the way we communicate them is in stories. Little narratives about what's happened to us and at a social level in mythologies. I don't know if any of you watched the Des on TV last week on the serial killer Dennis Nilsen. It's a really interesting and intelligent series. I loved it, and partly because the advisor was Brian Masters, the author who spent so much time in conversation with Nilsen. And in his book, Brian Masters says of Nilsen that to say he's mad or to say he's evil doesn't really constitute an explanation. And Brian Masters' phrase is, he's as morally mad as it's possible to be. So it was about his values and his scrambled values. That's how Masters, in his book, which I really recommend, how he actually can make sense of what's going on here. So it's just a little example that sprang to mind of how values cash out and why they really matter. Partly, I think, why we're interested in people who transgress our values as well, because we can't imagine how it can be possible, and we're fascinated to see, and it helps us to see the values we do commit ourselves to more clearly. But values aren't just an individual thing. The way we behave socially is constructed by shared values. You can talk about values milieu, societies and whole cultures. If you talk about English culture, Scottish culture, Welsh culture, we're partly talking about the stories, the myths, and the values that seem common to many people and that hold them together. That's partly what is at the heart of a culture. And similarly in societies, the great sociologist Emil Durkheim had the insight that what makes a society, what defines a society, is the fact that people come together to affirm shared commitments, he called them what's sacred. And they do that and communicate those values by holding up some symbol, some image. It might be a flag, it might be, we'll look at lots of examples in a minute, that people rally around, and that gives them emotional, he called it effervescence. He's thinking about something, well, today we might be thinking about a football match or some collective gathering that reinforces those things. And those symbols, the flag or whatever it might be, communicate some of the values and the feelings that they evoke. And that's what makes a society, in Durkheim's view. That's what holds a society together. At a kind of, that's looking at the what sociologists call the meta level of society. If you look at the meso level, the kind of middle layer, where we're structured into organizations and groups, from a religious group to a business organization, the place you work, and then down to microcultures like your family, those all have their values regimes as well. You know, in a family, there'll be a set of values, sometimes shared by some people and not others. The parents might adhere to certain values and try and enforce them, and of course they try and bring their children up in them. The children might have very different views, and there might be tensions. And at the meso level, groups are held together like societies by shared values, which is why I think organizations, I'll come back to this, have got so keen on value statements and getting people to sign up to their value statements. They think that'll make them more cohesive. May or may not. I'll come back to that. But it does hold us together. You know, think of a school, your school badge, you had a motto, virtue and work, or whatever it might be. And there were symbols and a uniform and all those sorts of things, all to try and cohere. And every school now, if you look at every school's front page on the web, you will find a very clear set of values. And a lot of schools, those now run right through the curriculum and are reinforced in all the lessons. So values matter, and they've become much more visible and much more stated recently. That's part of what I want to talk about, why we've become perhaps more, is it more committed to values or more anxious about them? Let's see. Final sort of footnote, as I'm just setting out my terms here. There's a very wonderful sociologist, influential sociologist of culture called Anne Swidler, and one of her great insights is that culture is always an excess. So it's not, don't think that, you know, your culture gives you your values, you absorb them, those are the values, and then you play them out. Swidler's point is that a culture has a huge excess of all sorts of things, including values. And I think we could say that the internet has made that excess even more excessive. So you can read that quotation from her for yourself. But it's not that culture tells us how we behave. It gives us a repertoire of values. And we shape our identities and decide who we are by selecting amongst those values. And we often select our communities, particularly the ones where we have a choice, our affinity groups and the online communities. When we feel comfortable, we just think, oh, I feel really comfortable with this group of people. Why do we feel comfortable with them? We share the ethos. There's something we have in common. It's a set of values. Even if we can't explicitly articulate what we are, we have an emotional sense. Because values are not purely rational. Sometimes we can articulate and spell them out, but they're just as much embodied and emotive, as Durkheim was pointing out. Now I want to go on to what I'm really wanting to do, which is to think about what values pertain in British society today. And I am confining myself to actually probably Great Britain. I don't think I'm even looking at Northern Ireland. Apologies if some of you are from there. And that's where I've done most of my empirical research. And this is based on that research over about 20 years, which is a lot of national surveys that I do with YouGov, as well as field work and interview and group work. I'll explain that. You know, shared storytelling is a very good way of getting at values. So I'm going to draw on all that material here. In trying to pick out, I'm just going to have three ethics, three sets of values, which I think have been very influential chronologically since the 19th century. Don't mean to say they're the only ones, but I think they have played a particularly important socially cohesive role. And there's some sort of sequence between them. So to start off with, I want to talk about what I identify as a sacrificial ethic. The sacrificial ethic, let me just first show you this. Some of you who have some church upbringing at school or in family or elsewhere, and that will depend partly on your age, some of you will know this hymn. It's nearly always sung on Remembrance Day on November the 11th, when there's a remembrance of those who fell in the world wars.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.